"Mama, please, she's got a fever," the small voice cracked, echoing faintly in the sterile hospital lobby. 6-year-old Leo clung to a worn teddy bear, his face streaked with tears and snot, his small frame trembling. He kept tugging at the sleeve of the burly security guard, Gary, whose patience was clearly thinner than the boy's t-shirt. Gary thought this was just another annoying kid, a nuisance to be shooed away. He had no idea Leo's mama wasn't just any sick woman, and her friends weren't the kind you could simply ignore. Today's story is about that mistake, about what happens when you underestimate a child's love and the fierce loyalty it can inspire. Leo's mama, Sarah Evans, was usually the one helping people, not needing help herself. She worked as a nurse, but even when she wasn't on shift, she was always there for anyone who needed a kind word or a band-aid. Just last month, a new cleaner at St. Jude's, struggling with rent, found a meal package and a quiet envelope of cash left anonymously in her locker. Sarah had a way of seeing the invisible people, the ones society overlooked, and making them feel seen. Now, though, it was Sarah who was invisible, lying pale and weak in a small apartment, burning up with a fever that wouldn't break. Leo had tried to get her to come to the hospital himself, but she was too weak to even stand. So, with a desperate kiss to her forehead, he'd taken her faded hospital card and run the 4 blocks, hoping to get help. He'd returned to find her barely conscious, having managed to crawl agonizingly close, collapsing in the alley just outside the hospital doors, clutching his teddy bear and his fear. "Look, kid, I told you," Gary grumbled, his voice low and guttural, not even bothering to look down at Leo. He adjusted his heavy belt, the radio clipped to it crackling with static. "You can't just walk in here and demand a doctor. Your mom needs an appointment, or an ambulance, not a 6-year-old telling me she's dying." He let out a weary sigh, a sound that grated on Leo's raw nerves. "We get this every day." Leo's lower lip trembled. He pushed the worn hospital card, creased and softened from years in his mama's purse, into Gary's hand. "But she said this card. It means she's a good patient. Please, Mr. Guard, she's really hot. She can't breathe right." He pointed a small, shaky finger towards the automatic doors. "She's just outside, in the alley. She couldn't walk anymore." Gary glanced at the card, then scoffed. This is just a patient ID. It doesn't get you a VIP pass. And she's in the alley? So she just collapsed there, did she? Probably trying to pull some stunt to skip the line. Not my problem, kid." He tossed the card back, and it fluttered to the cold, polished floor. "Now, get out of the way before I have to call someone to remove you. You're disrupting the hospital." Leo's shoulders sagged. His eyes welled up, blurring the bright lights of the lobby into hazy halos. He sniffled, then bent to pick up his mama's card, his small fingers fumbling with it. A few people walking past glanced his way, some with a flicker of sympathy, others with a quick, dismissive shake of the head. No one stopped. No one helped. The world kept moving, uncaring, while Leo felt a crushing weight descend on his chest. He looked up at Gary one last time, his mouth open to plead again, but the words wouldn't come. His throat felt tight, choked by tears. He could only stand there, a small island of misery in a tide of indifferent strangers, his chest heaving with silent sobs. Unknown to him, a frantic call from a concerned neighbor, who had seen Sarah collapse near the hospital, had already reached the Steel Vipers clubhouse. Suddenly, a low rumble, faint at first, vibrated through the floor. It was a deep, throaty growl that slowly, steadily grew louder, shaking the very glass of the automatic doors. Heads began to turn. The rumble became a roar, an unmistakable chorus of powerful engines, getting closer, faster. The air itself seemed to thicken with a new kind of tension, a raw, untamed energy. Then, a shadow fell across the sunlit entrance. A massive Harley-Davidson, gleaming chrome and dark leather, pulled up directly in front of the hospital doors, its engine purring like a caged beast. Behind it, more bikes, then more and more, stretching down the street as far as the eye could see. The sound was deafening. Gary, startled, finally looked towards the entrance. His jaw went slack. A towering figure, broad-shouldered and clad in a leather vest emblazoned with a snarling skull and wings, dismounted from the lead bike. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp and serious. He pulled off his helmet, revealing a neatly trimmed beard streaked with gray. "Hammer," someone whispered from the quickly forming crowd. The man, Michael Hammer Johnson, leader of the local Steel Vipers MC, walked with a quiet authority that instantly commanded the space. His gaze swept the lobby, taking in the scene, the crying child, the dismissive guard, the general indifference. His eyes narrowed when they landed on Leo. Hammer strode towards the boy, his heavy boots thudding softly on the polished floor. Gary, recovering, puffed out his chest. "Hold it right there," he barked, trying to sound authoritative, though his voice wavered slightly. "This is a hospital. No motorcycles, no loitering. You need to move along, all of you." He gestured vaguely at the growing number of bikers now dismounting and forming a silent, formidable wall outside the entrance. Hammer ignored Gary completely. He knelt down, his large hand gently resting on Leo's shoulder. "Hey, little man," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly soft. "What's all this about?" Leo, still sniffling, looked up. His eyes widened, a flicker of recognition in their depths. "Hammer?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. He pointed a trembling finger towards the alley, then back at Gary. "Mama, she's sick, very sick. And this man, he wouldn't let her in. He said she was faking." Hammer's head slowly turned, his gaze now locking onto Gary. The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop. Gary swallowed hard, feeling the weight of over 100 pairs of eyes, all belonging to large, silent men in leather, fixed on him. "Faking, huh?" Hammer's voice was low, deadly quiet. He stood up, towering over Gary. Gary straightened his uniform, trying to project confidence. "Look, buddy, I don't know who this Sarah is or who you think you are, but I'm head of security here. I follow procedures. This kid was making a scene, saying his mom was dying in the alley. People try to exploit the system all the time." He waved a dismissive hand. "And you and your gang are causing a disturbance." Hammer ignored Gary completely. He knelt down, his large hand gently resting on Leo's shoulder. "Hey, little man," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly soft. "What's all this about?" Leo, still sniffling, looked up. His eyes widened, a flicker of recognition in their depths. "Hammer?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. He pointed a trembling finger towards the alley, then back at Gary. "Mama, she's sick, very sick. And this man, he wouldn't let her in. He said she was faking." Hammer's head slowly turned, his gaze now locking onto Gary. The temperature in the lobby seemed to drop. Gary swallowed hard, feeling the weight of over 100 pairs of eyes, all belonging to large, silent men in leather, fixed on him. "Faking, huh?" Hammer's voice was low, deadly quiet. He stood up, towering over Gary. Gary straightened his uniform, trying to project confidence. "Look, buddy, I don't know who this Sarah is or who you think you are, but I'm head of security here. I follow procedures. This kid was making a scene, saying his mom was dying in the alley. People try to exploit the system all the time." He waved a dismissive hand. "And you and your gang are causing a disturbance. You need to leave now or I'm calling the police." Hammer took a slow step forward, then another. The other bikers, like a slow-motion wave, mirrored his movement, closing in, silent and menacing. Gary took an involuntary step back, his face paling. "The police?" Hammer chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That's rich. You think the police are gonna help you right now, Gary?" He paused, letting the name hang in the air. "Funny that. You remember that night, about 5 years back, when that car flipped on the highway, pinned that poor family inside? Everyone drove by, except one person, one nurse, off duty, who stopped and pulled a dying woman and her kids out of that wreck before the gas tank went up." Gary frowned, a flicker of uneasy recognition in his eyes. "What's that got to do with anything?" "Everything," Hammer replied, his voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. "Because that nurse, that was Sarah Evans. And the woman she saved, that was my sister. The one who's now alive and well, raising her 2 kids, thanks to Sarah. Sarah, who also happens to be our club's honorary medic, the one who patched up half the men standing outside when no one else would ask questions." He paused, his eyes drilling into Gary's. "Now, I hear this brave, selfless woman who saved lives, who helped this very hospital countless times, is lying in your alley, sick and alone, because you, Gary, decided she was faking it and wasn't worth the 5 minutes it would take to check." Gary's face drained of all color. His jaw worked, but no words came out. He remembered the newspaper headlines, the quiet heroics. He even remembered seeing Sarah Evans in the hospital sometimes, a kind smile for everyone. But he hadn't connected the dots to the frantic, snot-nosed kid and his dying mama. Suddenly, a man in doctor scrubs, Dr. Davies, rushed into the lobby, his face etched with concern. He glanced at the bikers, then saw Leo. "Leo, is that you? Where's your mother? We've been trying to reach her for hours. She missed her appointment yesterday, and her last test results, they weren't good. We even sent a community nurse to her apartment but couldn't get her to answer. She should have been here immediately." He looked past Gary, his eyes landing on Hammer. "Michael, what's going on?" Hammer pointed a finger at Gary. "This man here, doctor, decided Sarah Evans was faking it and left her for dead in your alley." Dr. Davis's eyes widened in horror. "In the alley? Sarah? She's critically anemic and has a severe infection. She needs urgent care. Every second counts." He pushed past Gary, his voice rising. "Get a stretcher, now! Someone get security to help me." Gary stammered, "But Dr. Davis, I thought—" "You thought what, Gary?" A sharp, authoritative voice cut through the air. The hospital administrator, Miss Albright, had appeared, drawn by the commotion and the sight of over 100 bikers outside her facility. Her eyes, usually calm, were blazing. "You thought our most dedicated nurse, who volunteers her time for community outreach, whose medical insights have saved countless lives, was faking it?" She looked at the terrified Leo, then at Hammer, then back at Gary. "Dr. Davis just confirmed her critical condition, and you, as head of security, blocked her entry?" Gary's breath hitched. His eyes darted around, seeing the faces of his colleagues, his subordinates, and the numerous patients and visitors who were now staring at him, murmuring in disgust. One of the junior guards, Dave, who had stood by silently earlier, now shook his head, his face a mix of shame and anger. "This is completely unacceptable, Gary," Miss Albright said, her voice chillingly calm. "You are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Get your badge and keys now." Gary's entire body trembled, sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked at Hammer, then at Leo, then at the sea of leather and steely gazes outside. His world, his job, his carefully constructed authority shattered around him. He fumbled at his belt, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unclip his radio. His face was a mask of utter defeat, a ghastly white. Meanwhile, Dr. Davies and several nurses, guided by Leo, had rushed out to the alley. Moments later, they returned, gently pushing a gurney with a frail, pale Sarah on it. Her eyes fluttered open, saw Leo, and a weak smile touched her lips. Hammer stood by the gurney, his hand resting on Leo's head, watching Sarah being wheeled away to the emergency room. As Gary was quietly escorted out by two other less imposing guards, his head down, no one looked at him. The bikers, who had been a wall of silent intimidation, now simply watched Sarah disappear down the hall. Hammer knelt again beside Leo, who was clutching his teddy bear and watching his mama go. "She's going to be okay, little man," Hammer said, his voice a promise. "They'll take good care of her now." Leo nodded, a tear still on his cheek, but a small spark of hope in his eyes. Hammer put a reassuring arm around the boy's shoulder, a silent guardian in the bustling hospital. Stories like this remind us that truth always finds its way to the surface and that loyalty can come from the most unexpected places. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales. What would you have done if you saw that child struggling alone? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and see you in the next story.